So another question that we got was by the Dragon Demands, who wants to know if and when Winds of Winter will eventually be released, how that might change the perspective of the mainstream media in terms of, it obviously being different to what we've seen in season six. And I also want to tie this question into the big question that I'm asking myself all the time is how will the people react to Winds of Winter just in general? Because I think with so much time that has passed now, it might not necessarily disappoint people, but it might be viewed very, very critically, even more so than with anything that George has done so far. Because, it has to justify the wait. And
No, well, it's kinda like when you released, A Feast for Crows when everybody was expecting, like, "Well, hold on, let's continue the story from A Storm of Swords,"
mm,
and that isn't really what we got it that's not at all what we
no,
got, we definitely didn't get that. So, okay, like, there could be that reaction, but then I guess there was a little bit maybe more anticipation or expectation or confidence that, "Okay, this sucks, but a few years from now, we're gonna get a Dance with Dragons," right?
mm,
When that book was ultimately split into 2. Um, with Winds, I think there's been so much time. Like, you look at different, r subreddits or YouTube channels where we're able to, like, jump into theories and really dive into this stuff,
mm,
and, like, before, if you said that you are gonna write a fanfic for The Winds of Winter, like, that would be kind of preposterous, but now it's no, that's actually kinda reasonable because that might be the closest thing to a conclusion we'll
mm,
get, unless you want the Game of Thrones conclusion. So, like, the Dragon Demands, like, suggest, like, how is this gonna be received? What would the opinions change about Game of Thrones? I think what you're saying is probably gonna be true, that there's gonna be some criticism that we waited this long and didn't get our expectations met. Probably. But, a big part of that is there is a lot of things that we just assume to be true
oh yeah,
that have not been proven true yet,
oh yeah,
you know? Um, like Trojan paste, like,
yeah, yeah.
everybody assumes this is true. Well, what if, like what if not? What if Jojen's alive? I
Mm.
I don't think so, but
We have so many theories, and we're taking them for granted when in reality we didn't get a conclusion to what we
right.
just left off with. For example, Fagon, Jojen Paste, all those things that we just decided are canon. Stannis uh never died, so he will retake Winterfell. Stuff like that, where it's uh,
The only evidence that we have, like, the only thing that's been said is that, no, Stannis is dead.
mm,
Like,
so
it's been said.
yeah.
I don't
But then again,
I
George
don't
said that
again,
he's alive
I
and
don't
well.
think that's true.
Yeah, George himself
Huh?
said that he's alive and well in the sixth book.
Yeah, so
Mm.
yeah, so he's, like, saying,
But just in general, I
kinda
think the
taking the
idea
steam
of
out of
Winds
that.
of Winter and people having so many very very good theories about Winds of Winter that the bar has been set, and if that's not met, if for example, Georgian paste is it's something that's not as cool as that. It's been a long time, and people will be very
Yeah,
vocal about
if
that.
I think that's one, though, if that I think it seems true, but if it's not, I don't
Mm,
care. It's one of the like, I don't know. The Aegon Fagon
mm,
one is the area that, bothers me a lot. Again, leaving that out of Game of Thrones, I think it's not that don't understand why they left him out. I understand narrowing this world down. You're trying to tell a more precise story than what you get in
mm.
a novelization. But it changes the story,
Yes.
and, it's not so much that you're changing the story, it's an adaptation, it's gonna take a couple different turns that the original material doesn't take. The thing is that it's gotta at least be equivalent to what the source material was,
Mm,
as far as quality, as far as, like, how we experience this. Do we enjoy this? Does this feel satisfactory? And the answer, I think, is a resounding no for most
mm,
people. I think you're starting to get a lot of people now, maybe not a lot, but I see them in the comments, a lot of people saying he's especially referencing Daenerys going mad.
mm.
I can't think of something that makes me more frustrated with part of the fan base than the Daenerys defenders or the defense of the way that plot was treated. in Game of Thrones, and then not having Aegon included, like or Fagon, whatever. It's interesting, like what you're
Mm.
saying, with Aegon, Fagon, like he's not been confirmed Blackfire, but we all are pretty sure he
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
But there's no reason why we actually should have that much certainty.
Mm.
But we've got a lot of certainty that that's true. Just like John being resurrected, we're pretty certain he's coming
Mm.
back. Well, the show confirmed it. Pretty sure R plus L equals J. I'm pretty sure. And the show confirmed it, but we don't actually
Yeah,
know. You know, for R plus L equals J, I think that's absolutely true.
yeah, yeah.
Like I
I
don't
think so
I
too.
don't get into the
Oh,
Chardane
please
stuff.
don't. Please. Please don't.
I but I think like the Jon Snow resurrection thing, like I however he comes back, I'll say there's one fallacy with fan base that the criticism of John, and I just thought of this, that they're very critical of John not like changing or evolving. Yeah, I thought he changed a lot,
Really?
right? Well, let me like explain that. Like he stops being a character. Like he doesn't grow anymore. As far as like the change, though, it's not that he doesn't change anymore. He stops being the John of season 5. Like he was becoming a political player at the wall. Like in a way, like it's being depicted that way. He's making decisions that aren't popular. He's got maybe a little bit more agency where he kind of loses all of that.
Mm.
He's persuaded in almost everything else that he does after he's resurrected in season 6. He's persuaded to the Battle of the Bastards, right? And then when he goes down to see Daenerys, nothing seems right. He just seems like a guy that's kind of being pushed along, moved downstream, like he's not actually in control of anything. Even though it's his decision to go meet with Daenerys at Tyrion's request, etc. But I think there's going to be a lot of changes as far as how is he depicted if he is
Oh yeah.
resurrected. I think Cersei is going to be reevaluated
So it's and
significantly.
that's
There's going to
inevitable.
be whatever she does. Maybe she blows up the set, maybe she doesn't, but she's going to do something comparable, I think.
Mm.
And there's going to be consequences. There's going to be something. Every time there's an act like that, there is a consequence, a significant consequence. A single character being killed changes the narrative dramatically, changes the direction of the plot dramatically, or it always has. At least in the books it does, and earlier on in Game of Thrones it did. Uh, Cersei killing, you know, at least hundreds of people, probably
Yeah.
thousands of people by blowing up the Sept, and who she kills is important. She kills Kevin Lannister. She kills, which that's obviously going to be different because Kevin
Yeah.
Lannister
He
dies at
already
the end
did.
of Dance, but killing Marjorie is a big
Mm.
deal. Killing the High Sparrow is a big deal. Not to mention, like this is a popular group. People like these people. This is their cult. This is their chosen cult.
Mm.
They want to be a part of
Mm.
this. If you watch season 6 when Tommen walks out,
Yeah.
you remember
Yeah.
that he walks out and Jamie's like, "Oh, they beat us," or Olenna says they beat us. There's a huge crowd of like followers. They're of small folk that support the faith. They support the faith militant or the sparrows, the High Sparrow. So that you go into season 7, episode 1, it just doesn't matter. And there's that silly scene with Arya and Hot Pie where he's like, "Oh yeah, Cersei blew up the Sept." And it's like this is just common
Yeah.
knowledge. Nobody cares. Yeah, so she's queen now. John won the Battle of the Bastards. Everything is very aware that it's a
Yeah.
TV show. So obviously, there's things that we're not going to have to deal with that in the book.
So how do you think people will respond to seeing that? I mean, obviously we as book readers, we as fanatics, we're gonna be very appreciative of those kind of things being dealt with better. Um,
Mhm.
but how's the media going to respond to it?
Book media is a little bit different than it analyzes it for what it is,
Hmm.
and then it's not going to attach it to whoever reviews Winds of Winter, whatever the most prominent reviewer of Winds of Winter is. It's going to be somebody who also is very familiar with the book
Hmm.
canon. They're going to have already read and have a personal review of the prior 5
Hmm.
books. So I think it'll do really well there, or at least as well as Dance. And I'm worried about it being as maybe convoluted as Dance, like in the individual chapters. if you, especially if you go on and you start reading after a Clash of Kings, you start seeing these chapters just start getting longer
Mm,
and longer and longer, and there's a lot of filler maybe in there. And there is some world building, but it's also just like George just kind of wants to
mm.
talk about
Yeah,
this thing,
yeah,
this
yeah,
atmosphere or whatever, and you get that. And I think we're going to get a lot of that in Winds of Winter. George is so uh, prolific and universally appreciated as an author. I think as far as obviously there's critics for him not completing the book, and I think that makes people start call when I hear the word hack or something like
mm,
that used towards George, I think it's kind of insane, you know. But those are usually critics coming from a place of anger because the book isn't out.
yeah.
Anybody's just reading Winds of Winter for what it is. I think it'll perform commercially
Oh,
and
definitely.
critically.
Yeah,
Really, commercially, it'll be great, but critically, I think it'll still if it's at the level of Dance, I think it'll be reviewed just as well.
yeah. It is.
If it's uh, if it's changing things and confirming the things that we thought were nonsense in Game of Thrones, that media, like Screen Rant, right?
Mm,
Like they always post something kind of nuts, but they I don't like certain like web media, but
mm,
I follow these people anyway, so who am I? I read some of these articles where they talk about, oh, this is actually a really good change from the books and stuff like back when Game of
mm,
Thrones was still on air, and it's easy to get caught up into that. Are they going to backtrack? And I don't know because I don't know how invested they'll be
mm.
into Winds of Winter. Will that be worthwhile talking about? We already have the spinoff series. We already not the spinoff. We already have the show. We already got it. We already got what they would have done if they had that source material. And it's like people claiming that they ran out of source material with, uh, Game of Thrones, and that's why D&D
No,
has such a problem.
no.
If you look at season 5, I think that kind of debunks that whole
Yeah,
theory
yeah.
because you took Feast and Dance and you crammed it into one single season and
Left out.
kind of just did your own
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
anyway.
and just left out the most important parts, and then kind of went back to it in season 6 with the whole river run plot and all. But let's not get into that. But it's insane. It's like, um, but that is the thing, man. I mean, I think Winds of Winter will never be able to reach this high bar because it's an impossible task at this point. Everyone expects or has their own idea of where the story is going, and obviously oftentimes that doesn't respond to people really well when their expectations are not met and stuff. So it's
Yeah,
impossible, um but it'll still be interesting to see the reaction of the media to it. I think it's probably just food for clickbait, connecting it to Game of Thrones, and take a character like John, like you said, and it's like, yeah, but well, John never fights against the Boltons in the north, and it's like, okay, well, what was the Battle of the Bastards about then, and stuff like that, where it becomes really clear that
they
this was
made it
not
up.
George. They made it up. Exactly. That's the kind of that's the kind of headlines that I'm expecting from the mainstream media. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
well, like,
We'll see.
with Bran being named king at the end, like, I think Bran will there's a good chance, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, and it's kind of loosely been confirmed by George in a way,
Mm,
depending on how you wanna
mm,
interpret how an actor relays information that he was told by a showrunner who says he was told that by George R.
mm,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, we're playing a lot of telephone.
Mm.
But, let's assume that that is true, that Bran becomes king, like, that's not the same thing as saying we're getting the same story in Game of Thrones that we would have gotten in at the end of Dream of Spring. I I think that's a very narrow way of viewing that. I think if it becomes Bran as king, like a lot of other stuff is going to happen. Like they have got to figure out what is going on with Aegon and the John Cunnington plots. Like that's going to be significant.
We have 22
So
POV characters. It's a lot. It's about time that
yeah,
some of them die, and some of them aren't even in the show. So that connection is
well, and
strong.
then
But
you're on Greyjoy. Like I think that's going to be another like this is going to this stuff matters.
yeah,
narratively it matters. Dorne is still very much in the mix, you know, like so the way that the Ironborn and Dorne were just kind of dismissed
Mm.
in season 7, like that irrelevant. We don't actually have anything interesting to say about them, so
Yeah.
they just basically deleted it. You know, it is like Jamie and Brienne, like their travels in a feast for crows.
Mm.
Like I get it, that doesn't maybe communicate great, uh, you know, TV, I guess.
Mm.
But what it does demonstrate is that we've already seen Game of Thrones not do what was in the books. So for like the original question,
Mm.
how will it be received? I don't know. I think it'll be received well, but like as far as like general audiences, Game of Thrones already bailed on a lot of the source material
Mm.
while they were in the middle of adapting that source material that I think most people will view wins and see the differences and be like, well, of course, like this is obviously different. And then George made a post a while ago saying that this is going to be a very different
Yeah.
outcome. How that will be reviewed, I don't know. If people have read the books first, which is I don't know, I think that's actually a pretty rare thing.
Mm.
But if you've read all the books, Winds of Winter, I don't think it's going to shock you as
Mm.
much. You've already seen how Game of Thrones changed things. You know, if you watch Game of Thrones and then immediately go read Winds of Winter without the context of the prior 5
Mm.
books, then but who's doing that? I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's doing that. Somebody might. Some psycho might do that. I don't know.
So yeah, we
I don't know.
shall
I guess I don't
see.
have a whole lot to add.
We shall see how it goes. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the channel, coming on the podcast, and looking forward to having you back on in the future, man. All the best. Definitely subscribe
Yeah,
to the D Charles channel, one of the best Assault Vice and Pirates channels out there.
absolutely. Thank you for having me on here.
Always, always. See ya.